Welcome to G.I.Joe Chronicles, Outpost Edition.
I trust your mission was equally well executed.
I want a stone cold righteous attention.
Militarily speaking, it's only fair to say the Cobra Commander is a world-class buffoon.
Welcome to G.I.Joe Chronicles, Outpost Episode 10. I am Jim Meal, also known as Jim the Joe Junkie. Over the course of this podcast, we intend to chronologically discuss the toys, comics, cartoons, and many other aspects of G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero, which is my favorite pop culture subject. Without getting too bogged down in the details, just my co-host and I having a conversation and reminiscing. And of course, that means that I'm not alone. Joining me today is Jarrod Alberich, the yard sale artist, also known as Death Probe. Thanks for returning once again to the Outpost, Jarrod. Another year of great action figures. And of course, I'm going to ask you about any special missions you've done lately.
Man, I haven't done a lot lately in the world of G.I. Joe. I missed Joe Fest this year. I've done Joe Fest before, but I did Heroes Con this year, and then Joe Fest is like the weekend immediately following. And your old buddy, when I say old buddy, I mean I'm old. I can't do back-to-back weekend shows like I did in the past. But I did acquire a little bit of Joe stuff since last time we talked. I made a trip to my local Ollie's where they had approximately 6.2 million Lady J's and about 4 million figures from the Snake Eyes movie. I'm talking classifieds here. And seriously, out of all those, I was flipping through them all. I found one figure that wasn't Lady J or classified. It was Zarana, and I don't have her. So I picked her up. She was $4.99 at Ollie's. And I thought, well, I like Zarana. So I was like, that was cool for me. I was excited about that. So I added Zarana to the collection. And then on the art side, I think I was recently on an episode of Real American Headcast with our friend Aaron over there. And I drew a Dr. Mindbender book page sketch on Page from a Military Manual. But that's what springs to mind. That's what I've been up to in Joe Land, buddy. What about you?
Joe related, I received my 15 volumes of Creating G.I. Joe from Dan Klingensmith.
Oh, wow.
I'd seen his Kickstarter before. He had a couple volumes here, and I'm like, I want to get the whole thing. So he Kickstarted the last 2 volumes, and I said, all right, now's the time to do it. Bought all of them. If you ever get a chance to look at them, they are amazing. They've got pre-production art for the figures, vehicles, all that stuff. And they even have quite a few of vehicles and figures that were proposed that never happened.
Oh,
those are pretty cool. But
anything that showed it, because oftentimes when we look in the comics, we go, I wish they'd made a vehicle of that. I wonder if there's been any crossover that you've noticed.
I've quickly looked through all of them. I didn't see anything like that. See, I'm a big utility vehicle guy. I like the utility vehicles, like the Bridge Layer and the Road Toad trailer. That's one of my favorites. They had some of that stuff where it was like a repair bay. That was pretty cool. But no, nothing that in the comics or the cartoons that correlate.
Oh, okay.
On the show side, I guess you'd call it a show. Last weekend, my brother and I had our, what we're calling second annual. We had a yard sale at my house. And last year we thought, okay, it was just a fluke. But it was no fluke. We killed it at the yard sale. And we had a lot of return customers from last year. We had some people that came both days again this year. It was neat having it at the house, seeing people from the community coming and joining in. I was able to get all my stuff out, not just the stuff that I would normally bring to Comic-Cons or toy shows. I got all my vintage media out, all my Tonka trucks and all those other things that I would normally bring to other shows. So cleaned some of that out and got to spend time with my brother too. So,
right. You can take all that money you made and buy more G.I. Joes with.
Well, now that you mention it, I did just fund the Skybound.
Yeah, as did I, my friend.
Yeah. So some of that money's going to Skybound. It just got to the point where I couldn't resist. With all the stuff that they're throwing in with it from all the stretch goals, it was too much to resist. Now I backed the Cobra one.
Oh, I backed to the Joe one. Okay. I really considered the Cobra one heavily because when I looked at it, it was kind of a 3-to-1 breakout.
Yeah.
And most people were getting Joe. And I thought, well, the Cobra ones will be more rare then. I just kept looking at that blue cover with Snake Eyes on it. And I was like, how am I not going to get Snake Eyes? I can't deny it.
But that's what I've been doing in Joe World. Thanks, Jarrod, for sharing that and catching us up. As we have discussed in previous episodes, we're splitting up each year into 2 segments. For the toys, this means that we're going to discuss the figures in part 1 of the associated year and the vehicles and playsets of the associated year in part 2. This will allow us to discuss each figure and vehicle a little bit more. So, with all the introduction out of the way and the fine print out of the way, let's roll right into our first segment that we call That Figures.
He'll fight for freedom wherever there's trouble.
Are those the new Joes, hasbro?
Yes, Commander.
This episode, we will be discussing the figures of 1984. What can be said of this year other than Hasbro was starting to crank up the heat? So many collectors' favorites were released this year. This year, there were a couple of firsts. First figure and animal companions with Spirit and Freedom, as well as Mutt and Junkyard. The Joes continued to expand on specialties by adding a paratrooper, a jungle specialist, a flamethrower, and a Coast Guardsman. Cobra ranks got a major upgrade, adding a pilot, a ninja, a master of disguise, a saboteur, and a few more. This was a huge year for the introduction of Cobra characters, many that are still relevant and popular. Here at the Outpost, we will discuss each of the new figures that were released in the year that we are covering. We will cover code name and specialty, file name, a statement from their file card, a brief description of the figure. The stories and information that made up these file cards reshaped these plastic action figures into characters that we could relate to and would begin to immerse us into a vast world that would continue to grow.
We will also be using a combination of 3djoes.com, yojo.com, the book, The Ultimate Guide to G.I. Joe, and my main man Jim here has added a new source of information to his library, which I think he mentioned earlier, Creating G.I. Joe by Dan Klingensmith. He has all 15 volumes of the set. It has information about each character. And as he mentioned, it's got pre-production art, concepts for pose names, all kinds of really neat stuff. So those are the sources we're going to be using. We're going to be using 3D Joe's, yojo.com, Ultimate Guide to G.I. Joe, and Jim's Fanciness.
Thank you, Jarrod. Before we go over the details of these figures, Jarrod, do you have any general memories of the 1984 figures? Something that just, you look at that line and you go, this is where I was, or this is what we were doing, or something like that.
Yeah. The 84 line, you kind of mentioned it. This is where it really kind of popped and really became something. Yeah, 84, I was living in Fort Rucker, Alabama, which is now known as Fort Novosel. I was in about 2nd grade. My favorite shirt to wear to school was my Ghostbusters shirt because it had just come out in 84. It was quite the time to be alive. G.I. Joe was quite the immersive world. Now, I wasn't as into it, but I also remember 84. This is my 2nd grade memory, so go with me on this. But I want to say 84 was about the time He-Man popped as well. I want to say that most of my friends were either Joe kids or He-Man kids.
This is that time where the He-Man, G.I. Joe, Transformers, couldn't separate them. They were...
Yeah, all your kids, your friends, you go to sleep over, and this friend has a bunch of He-Man. He's a He-Man kid. Now, I didn't know any rich kids, so I didn't have any Transformers friends. But yeah, 84 was definitely a good time for G.I. Joe to pop. I know we're going to get to it, but it was particularly exciting to me because I want to say this was the first, well, it may have been the first ever. You'll know better than me. It's the first time I ever did a mail-in Hooded Cobra Commander. We're going to talk about that later. I was so excited about that.
This wasn't the first mail-in because we had Duke and Major Blood, who is on cards this year, but were mail-ins previous year.
That's right. That's right. It was my first mail-in. And when was the Wolverine? Because I got that mail-in as well.
Wolverine came out in 83.
Okay, so that was technically my first mail-in then. Okay. Because I remember did the Wolverine and Hooded Cobra Commander, but I was excited about my Wolverine, but I was really excited about Hooded Cobra Commander. Like, I was the bee's knees at school because they're like, you got Hooded Cobra Commander because he was rare. And the one in my collection right now in my display case is the one from my childhood. I've had it forever.
I can't say that about any figure. I can say that about pieces of some of my vehicles, but no figures.
I got a handful out there in my cabinet that are probably 20, 30 of them that are legit from my childhood.
That's neat. That's neat. So some of my general memories, similar to you. Let's see, I would have been 9. So I would have been, what, 2nd or 3rd grade too?
Yeah, I think you were like, 3rd grade, something like that. Yeah. You're so old.
I know. That was so long ago. I mean, 83, I knew about them, but 84, I remember going to stores and getting figures and picking them off eggs and look at them going, these are pretty amazing. Some of the memories are, one of them I got because I was a ring bearer in a wedding. The bride and groom gave me a figure. I remember looking at another one going, he comes with a lot of crap. I want that guy. Some of them, you see them once and you wish you would pick them up because you don't see them again on pegs. This is when I really started ramping up my collecting of G.I. Joe, was this 1984 line. So let's get into these legendary characters by starting with the G.I. Joe team members. Jarrod, why don't you start with the first one?
All right. I will start us off with Blowtorch, the Flamethrower.
Manning the howitzer?
That's the flamethrower. Codename Blowtorch.
Blowtorch's real name is Timothy P. Hanrahan. His primary military specialty is, you would think, firefighting, but it's infantry special weapons. Secondary military specialty, small arms armorer. His birthplace is Tampa, Florida. His grade is an E4. Blowtorch is thoroughly familiar with all military incendiary devices and flame projection equipment. To Blowtorch, the use of fire in warfare is a science that predates the bow and arrow. He's a qualified expert on the M7 flamethrower, the M16, the M1911 A1 pistol. Blowtorch can't sleep unless he's near a smoke detector. Cigarette smoke drives him bananas. He always sits near the exit in a movie theater and refuses to live anywhere where he can't safely jump out of the windows. This is not irrational to him. These are the actions based on intimate knowledge. Blowtorch is a very distinct looking figure. He is basically wearing a yellow jumpsuit with red pads all over it. Got a cool little helmet. The one thing I never quite understood is why his flamethrower piece itself was green. It didn't match any of the other. It was so weird. But still a really striking looking figure. You're not going to mistake him for anyone else when you see him.
You get into the later years and people pick on Sci-Fi in 86 for the first Bright Joe.
Mm-hmm.
But they kind of totally gloss over Blowtorch, a bright yellow and red guy in 84.
Pork chop sandwiches.
Yeah, the parody of the PSA.
But you're right. He was like the original Bright Joe.
But it was the right colors for his specialty, I thought. But I would think that, you'd want to be a little bit brighter. He's very recognizable to most everybody. I mean, you can't, if somebody said, who's Blowtorch? You're going, well, that guy right there.
Yeah, really. I only ever see people confuse him and barbecue. I think because they both start with a B. They're both flame related. They're pretty different. Although barbecue's got that orange suit, you know, so it's not that far off.
Now, something coming out of the Dan Klingensmith book is that, as with a lot of the characters, there's probably 10 different color schemes that they were proposing until they came up with this color. Anything from purple and green to black and red, and there's all kinds of different color schemes. And headgear as well. All right. I've got an easy one next. Clutch version 2. We talked a little bit about him previously. Vamp Mark II driver, codename Clutch, file name Steinberg Lance J. Primary military specialty, transportation. Secondary military specialty is infantry. And he's from Asbury Park, New Jersey. Clutch was a mechanic at Manny's Mean Machines and was heavily involved in racing street machines prior to enlistment. He graduated with advanced infantry training, covert ops school, executive bodyguard school, ranger school, qualified expert with M14, M16, M1911A, M3A1, M79, and M60. He greases his hair with motor oil, rarely shaves, and chews on the same toothpick for months. Clutch still calls women chicks. So that hasn't changed since 1982. He's the same figure as 1983 with the swivel arm, but he's tan. He came with the Vamp Mark II, which is a desert-themed vehicle. He's got a helmet, and he's got some green shoulder pads and green gun holsters. Still pretty basic. Not a whole lot to discuss.
Just personally, I think this is the first time I became aware of a repaint. Like, I thought he was real neat because I was like, oh, he's in a different outfit. He's in the tan outfit, and then it was like, oh, yeah, okay. I get it now. It's same figure, different color, but I just thought it was neat.
As I was reading that file card, one of the schools he graduated from is Executive Bodyguard School. And what was he often doing, seen in the comic books? Transporting high, generals or colonels or whatever. That's what he was doing.
Good catch. In fact, I'd forgotten completely about the bodyguard thing until you read it on the file card just now.
That's why we're doing this. To remind ourselves, hey, remember? Anything else about Clutch?
No, man. I'm just going to remind you about Cutter.
Sounds good.
Cutter is the hovercraft pilot. Came with the whale, which is one of the greatest toys ever made. Still top tier. My favorite thing about Cutter is his real name is Skip A. Stone. Skip A. Stone.
Larry is very clever.
He is. Primary military specialty, hovercraft captain, secondary military specialty, special services. He coached the women's swimming team at Annapolis. His birthplace is Kinsley, Kansas. His grade is lieutenant junior grade. Cutter badgered his congressman for 2 years to get into Annapolis, then realized his family lacked two essential ingredients, power and influence. Opted for the Coast Guard Academy instead. He wanted a life at sea, even though his hometown is as far away from either ocean as you can get, exactly 1,561 miles from San Francisco and New York City. So I break it in here, but they clearly found the dead center spot for him to be from when they made him. Back to the card. His iron will and contrary nature, laced with a truly bizarre sense of humor, might explain why. Found out the Joe team didn't have any Coast Guardsmen. Raised such a stink that the Coast Guard top brass had to pull every string necessary to fix it. It also gave the brass a way to get Cutter out of their hair. There you have Cutter's file card. His figure description is kind of a basic Coast Guard uniform, the dark pants with the light blue button-up shirt. He wears a life preserver and, most importantly, a Boston Red Sox baseball cap. If you know anything about the Hasbro company, they're based out of that area, and they're out of Rhode Island, I think, but they're big Boston fans. So much so that back in the day, a couple of years ago, they had a thing on Amazon called Kindle Worlds, where they opened up their property where anyone could write their property. And I did actually begin writing a book. When you do it, it comes with a set of rules they mail to you. And one of the rules is there will be no New York Yankees gear whatsoever.
Really?
Not for anybody, because they're such Red Sox fans.
Wow.
That's in the actual rules. Anyway, let me get back to Cutter. I described the figure. I think he came with nothing. Nothing. That's right. Yep. He came with nothing except the whale, of course. And there you have Cutter.
I have to ask before we get into the serious part. So this special services coaching women's swimming team, were they in parentheses when they put special services, or was it a legit swimming team coach?
Not going to go in. I'm not asking any questions. Cutter kind of a troublemaker, it seems like. He just likes to race ruckus wherever he's at. Man, he came with a cool vehicle. I think the Cutter that I have in my display cabinet is the one from my childhood. I'm almost positive.
So, as a military guy, what is your thoughts? There's a reason I'm asking this. What are your thoughts on the Coast Guard?
I'm a fan of the Coast Guard. I may be a bit different because Coast Guard Academy was a very real possibility for me going to college. I was very drawn to the Coast Guard Academy. I thought that was interesting. And I went to communications officer school for the Air Force with a guy who was former Coast Guard. And that's when I discovered that I probably dodged a bullet almost literally, because I found out, like, percentage chance-wise of getting shot on duty, their percentages are higher than any other service because they do a lot of drug interdiction. The guy I went to school with had been shot twice, both times in the vest. He had his vest on, his bulletproof vest, so he was fine. And I thought, well, I guess I dodged a literal bullet by not going to the Coast Guard Academy.
That's kind of what I was wanting to know. My hometown, Grand Haven, Michigan, has a Coast Guard station along the river there. A lot of times, as you mentioned, I think the Coast Guard gets a bad rap.
Yep.
I don't think people realize how much the Coast Guard does.
Yeah.
You know?
But they do some of the most dangerous stuff, too.
Yeah.
Like a lot of those rescues they're doing is for reasons. You know, like there's a giant storm and they go out. So they kind of get picked on because they don't have an aggression factor, really. You know, you don't see them with planes and bombs and tanks and all that stuff. But they do some important and serious stuff. So I'm with you on this, man.
Yeah. With having a Coast Guard station in my hometown, I thought it was neat when this came out with a whale that, hey, he's from the Coast Guard. Cool. Unfortunately, my brother got the whale and Cutter for Christmas one year, and I was very jealous. Not as jealous as you, Jason, with the Sky Stripe.
No one can be.
But Cutter, I liked him. He was great on the cartoons. His personality would fit good. I don't know how much he was. I don't think he was used a whole lot in the comics.
Like it's just a fair amount. I always kind of tip my cap to the vehicle drivers who sort of raise a Cutter, because a lot of vehicle drivers become forgettable and unused, and we never really know much about them. But Clutch raised a level into, I mean, he had a single issue all about him. I think Cutter raised to a level as well.
Yeah, I remember, was that issue 36? It was the one with the asp and the whale on the cover, kind of a painted cover.
Oh, I think Michael Golden painted that cover. Yeah.
Possibly. The hydrofoil and the whale were chasing each other around the atoll, and you come find out that was for Cobra Island. And other vehicle drivers like Wild Bill, he was in it for the whole.
Yep, he's definitely one of those that was elevated. Yeah.
All right. Oh, why does this one have to follow Cutter? We're going to talk about Deep Six, and this is Deep Six version 1, the Brick. So Deep Six is a shark driver. His file name is Malcolm R. Willoughby. His primary military specialty is diver. Secondary military specialty is small craft pilot, motorized. His place of birth was Baltimore, Maryland. Deep Six never won any awards for being friendly. Became a Navy diver so that I could be alone. Enjoys bottle cap collecting, solitaire, and the New York Times crossword puzzles. Only 12 out of 50 Navy divers passed the strict requirements for the coveted diver position on the Joe team. 8 washed out in the practical application testing. Of the 4 finalists, Deep Six could hold his breath the longest. Torpedo says, down in the depths where light doesn't reach you and the water pressure can crush you like an eggshell, that's where Deep Six likes it. So let's talk about this figure. It's got a very unique play feature that you can pump up air into his figure, and he's supposed to rise in the water and then release it to sink down. Now, he has literally 2 points of articulation. I give him credit for trying something different. When I look at this figure, I think of, what were those movies in the 80s? Was it Leviathan, and what was the other one that was like that? Oh, Deep Star 6? Deep
Star 6.
Yes. Yep. That's what I think of when I see this figure in this suit. It's gray with some yellow trim and a big, like an old style globe for a helmet.
Buzz Lightyear.
Very good. Very good. Buzz Lightyear. Yes, that's a good way to put it. Thoughts on Deep Six?
Now, I always thought he was cool because he was so different. It's a very different figure. So I guess I greatly rewarded different when I was younger. And I like him. He definitely does stand out due to his very different mold. I don't know that I ever had all the pieces and parts to, the little pump and all that to see if that actually worked. So I can't tell you. I did eventually get a Deep Six in my collection, but like I said, I don't think I have all the pieces and parts. I don't think I've ever owned a shark. That's all I got on the guy. He's all right with me, even though he's a grumpy guy.
I don't want to sound like I'm, dogging on him, but he's just one of those that when you've got a whole line of amazing articulated figures, and then there's this guy. So
yeah, I mean, like I said, they tried something new, and at least he's got a memorable personality. He's the cold fish of the group, right? So
yeah, there's plenty of times in the comic where he's portrayed as that. All right, what's next?
What's next is perhaps the face of G.I. Joe in a lot of certain circles. It is Duke, the old first sergeant. His file name is Conrad S. Hauser. His primary military specialty is airborne infantrymen. Secondary military specialty, artillery and small arms armor. Birthplace, St. Louis, Missouri. Is a master sergeant. Duke was fluent in French, German, and English when he enlisted in 1967. I like how they added English to that. Like, I would just assume. Anyways, graduated top of his class at airborne school at Fort Benning. He opted for a U.S. Army Special Language School. He specialized in Han Chinese and Southeast Asian dialects. Went to Special Forces in 1969, worked with tribesmen in the boonies of South Vietnam, ran 4 different Special Forces schools, turned down a commission in 1971, commands by winning respect, and current assignment acting first sergeant of G.I. Joe. His statement after declining the commission: they tell me that an officer's job is to impel others to take risks so that the officer survives to take the blame in the event of a total catastrophe. With all due respect, sir, if that's what an officer does, I don't want any part of it, end quote. I don't really think I have to describe, but I will. He wears the olive drab green pants with the brown boots. He's got that tan long sleeve shirt with the American flag on the side. He came with a green helmet, a submachine gun, black binoculars, and a salt pack, which is another way of saying backpack. And then I remember some of them, if not all of them, the flag was like a decal that you could actually put on him. So that is Duke, who I'm just going to jump right in and say kind of went from a worst to first with me. I think we've chatted about this a little bit before. Never really liked Duke that much. I always thought he was just super generic. They introduced him to the team to basically be the enlisted field team leader, which was Stalker's job. And I always thought Stalker was much more interesting and a cooler character. So I'm like, this is a Stalker replacement, and he's not even that interesting. Now, fair is fair. I just read the file card. And now I see why. Remember, I said he went from worst to first. He went first to me. Well, maybe not first, but at least a higher tier. In the Devil's Due run, I think we've talked about that because Blaylock really took him and said, okay, what was he doing in the 7 years that G.I. Joe was gone? He's doing a lot of covert ops, all this. If you read this file card, you can see where he got that. This Duke is really cut for doing sort of CIA, Black Ops, covert ops type of stuff. So he had all this potential way back in 84. I didn't realize all that was on his file card back then. And I just feel like they didn't use it. I feel like they just kind of made him this poster child of G.I. Joe, and they stole that limelight from Stalker, which I've never liked. It's never sat well with me. But I do like him better thanks to Devil's Due. And I'll stop talking about that and let you go.
I was never a fan of Duke until, as you said, the Devil's Due era. I think it was issue 5 when he was chased Major Blood. Mm-hmm. And issue 5, it was very James Bondy. Now, a couple things. As I mentioned, this figure in 1984 was carded. In 83, he was a mail away, and there are some differences. You mentioned it. The mail away had the flag. The carded figure did not come with the American flag.
Oh.
And there was a couple differences with the backpack and the helmet. If you really want to, listeners, if you really want to look at it, go to 3djoes.com. They explain all the differences. There's a difference in the file card picture. One's close up and one's farther away. One of the differences way you can tell is a mail away or a carded file card. But as a figure, he's the face of G.I. Joe for many, many years. Also, if Duke wasn't around, we wouldn't be having this debate on whether it's Snake Eyes and Scarlet or Duke and Scarlet.
That also pisses me off.
Right? Exactly.
Snake Eyes and Scarlet, everyone, for all you listeners out there. If you're shipping
only way to go.
Duke, I don't know if we can be friends.
Only way to go. All right, let's get off of Duke and let's talk about first of 2 figures with animals, and we're going to be talking about Mutt and Junkyard.
Who's by the bivouac?
That's the dog handler, codename Mutt, and his dog Junkyard.
Mutt, his code name, and he was a dog handler. His file name was Stanley R. Perlmutter. His dog's name was Junkyard. And his primary military specialty, dog handler. Secondary military specialty, infantry. And his birthplace was Iselin, New Jersey. Mutt is a natural with animals. He likes them, and they like him. The problem is that he gets along better with dogs than he does with humans. He graduated Jungle Warfare Training School, attached as a cadre to Special Ops School, and as advisor to the Security and Enforcement Committee. Qualified expert M16, M14, M19 11A, auto pistol, and a MAC 11. If you're sitting next to Mutt in the mess hall, don't try filching anything away from his tray. He'll bite your leg off. As a description, he's got green pants, a green shirt with a brown vest. He's got on his left arm a glove, probably a thick glove for training. He's got a baton and a helmet with a nice muzzle for himself, not Junkyard. And he's got that cool MAC 11 that didn't come with classified, and a lot of people are salty about it. But now reading this file card, he did come with the M16 as a classified figure, and that's one of his qualified experts, so it fits. As a figure, this is one of those that kind of different color, but not way off the spectrum for a military. And this one is the one that I received as a gift for being a ring bearer in one of my dad's friend's wedding. So this one, they're very distinct memory for me.
Very nice.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on Mutt and Junkyard? Oh, maybe I should describe Junkyard. He's a black dog, maybe a Rottweiler type.
Sure. Yeah.
Sure. So yeah, he's a black dog.
Yeah, I mean, this ushers in the era of the animal partner with, with the Joes, and I think we all know which one is the top tier of that. And I think we'll get to that next 2 episodes of this. 2 more 86. It's 86, isn't it? I thought it was 80. I thought it was 1986 when Snake Eyes came with Timber. Okay, it's 85.
No, it was 85.
Okay, so we're almost there. We're almost there. Yeah, to me, Mutt and Junkyard are kind of cool. I think I probably have them in my collection now. They've just always kind of been there. To me, they're very much cartoon characters. I feel like they got a lot more mileage in the cartoon. I remember a little bit in the comic book. Likable. I mean, everybody likes a cool dog, right? But other than that, yeah, I don't have a lot of tie to them. I think they're neat. Other than that, yeah, they're just Joe's to collect to me, actually. Joe's to collect. I like them, but I'm not super tied to them. But it's cool that you are, because you have that cool memory of receiving it as a gift.
I think my brother and I, this last cartoon episode that will be coming out, there were quite a few episodes with him in that. And I wonder, similar with Spirit and Freedom, kids like dogs.
Yeah.
They are really wanting to bring the kids in. And so that was probably one of the reasons why he got a little more screen time. Now, in the comic, I remember, this is 84. And I remember that later on, like in the 70s, even maybe 80s, he was still around, even into the late 90s. Because I remember him going after the Dreadnoks because Buzzer hurt Junkyard. When I was really heavy into the collecting comics, him and Spirit went into Millville before Cobra took over that little town when the original Cobra Commander came back.
Oh, okay.
And Larry was still using him up until, into the late 90s, 100s. So he was very cartoon oriented. I can see it because if I remember right, you didn't watch many of the cartoons when they came out, correct?
Right. Yeah. I lived in Germany at the time, so we didn't get a lot of them. So yeah, I'm not big on the cartoons. I'm not super familiar with them. And I'm also not super familiar with G.I. Joe once we get sort of 60s and later in the comic. Is another area, kind of a blind spot for me that I'm slowly filling in as I do all these podcasts with you and Pat and Aaron.
Yeah, when you get that compendium, you'll have all of them.
Oh.
You'll have a read.
I'll have plenty to read.
Yes. Anything else before we move on to the next one?
No, we're ready. We're all set.
All right.
Let's move into Recondo.
Who's on the watchtower? That's the Jungle Trooper. Codename Recondo.
Recondo the Jungle Trooper. File name Daniel M. LeClaire. Primary specialty is infantry. Secondary is intelligence. He's from Wheaton, Wisconsin. Recondo hates the cold. He loves hauling a rucksack through the bush and sweating through his camis. This is disgusting. When he's in the jungle, he owns it. Anybody else is trespassing. Cadre member at the Jungle Warfare Training Center. Qualified expert M16, the Swedish K grease gun, M1911A1 auto pistol, and M79 grenade launcher. A jungle is like some single gigantic hostile organism. It can sense when you fear or hate it, and it is wholly without mercy. When Recondo steps into a jungle, it sings to him like a mother soothing a troubled child. Recondo's figure was kind of cool. He had those tiger stripe camo pants. He had a khaki long sleeve shirt that's rolled up, not unlike Duke, actually. Similar in there. They probably ordered from the same khaki shirt company. And then he had that more sort of Australian style boonie cap tipped up on one side. He had that mustache. I always thought he just looked Australian and he should be Australian, but he's from Wisconsin. So I don't know. But yeah, that's what he looks like. He came with a green rifle that I remember had like tape on it and a green backpack. And he had a real unique look. So he was kind of cool to me to see. Like you said, I always thought he should have been Australian. And I can't identify with him because my least favorite thing to do, whether I was in uniform or not, is to like sweat through it because it's just disgusting. Uniforms have a particularly disgusting smell when you sweat through them. I don't know why that is, what they make it out of, but yeah, no thanks on that. But anyway, Recondo, what do you think, man?
Recondo was one of those for me. At this time when he was released, I was into the cartoons, not the comics. I remember several episodes with him in the jungle. I thought he was unique. Back in the day when you're playing with your friends, you had to have that unique gun, right? You were playing whatever you were playing.
Right.
And I remember wrapping up one of my guns with a bandana, just like Recondo did. That's one thing I remember. And as a figure, and I got this out of the Ultimate Guide to G.I. Joe, there are 3 different camo patterns for Recondo. So for you completists out there, make sure you got 3 different ones if you're wanting to get all the different variants.
Oh,
I'm
man.
not particular, but
yeah, I don't care.
Yep.
I just have the one. I find, and maybe you do as well, Jim, I find the biggest problem with Joes of this era is, as far as damage, it's almost always the broken crotch piece or a broken thumb. Of course, there's the busted O-ring that's easily replaceable, but it's the thumb and the crotch piece is broken. And on him in particular, it's that hat brim that's not tilted up. It's the hat brim that sticks out. I see a lot of broken ones on that.
I mean, I wonder if that's because people tried to fold them up, maybe like the other side.
Maybe.
I've got one Recondo and I'm good. Yeah. I'm not going to try and get the other 2 patterns. Moving on to Ripcord.
And the Halo Jumper, codename Ripcord.
The Halo Jumper. His file name was Wallace A. Weems. His primary military specialty was airborne infantry. Secondary military specialty was demolitions. Birthplace was Columbus, Ohio. Ripcord joined the Civil Air Patrol in high school, discovered skydiving, and joined the G.I. Joe team so he could jump from much higher altitudes. Qualified expert M16, M1911A1 auto pistol, Carl Gustav 9mm Parabellum, and Browning high power. Let's say you got a trouble spot. You can't sail, walk, or ride in. So you send a plane in so high that it can't be seen or heard. Ripcord jumps and drops like a rock for thousands of feet, then opens his chute at the last possible moment to avoid visual and electronic detection. What he does once he hits the ground, you don't want to hear about. So reading that, I should say that a Halo Jumper is a high-altitude, low-opening parachute.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of those instances where reading and learning the file cards and the comics and stuff, I learned that.
I think this is where I learned what a Halo Jumper was too, from this particular file card, as seen in the James Bond movie Tomorrow Never Dies.
Got to bring it back to James Bond.
Always.
So his uniform is a pretty basic camouflage jumpsuit, but what really neat is what he comes with. He came with the parachute that wrapped around him, simulated that, and then he had his helmet with his oxygen mask, I'm assuming, that hooked to his chest. Looks like that's an M16 style gun. Pretty neat hardware and equipment that he came with. Unique and really good for what he does.
I don't have it in front of me, but didn't he have the more compact M16 style? Was he the one that had sort of the shorter version? I don't have it pulled up in front of me. That's my bad.
It looked like a standard.
I'm probably thinking of somebody else.
Are you thinking of Grunt?
No. Someone actually had like the smaller stock version because it was all about, needing the smaller gear and the lightweight. One day on the show, we'll figure out who the hell I was talking about.
No. What are your thoughts on Ripcord?
My biggest problem with Ripcord is he's kind of forgettable to me, probably because I didn't have him. I do remember learning Halo because of him, but I always felt like the problem with him is he was released in the 84 series. The 83 series, I think, had Airborne, and to me, it was like, it's the same guy, and I still get people on the Headcast Network when we talk G.I. Joe always laugh at me because I always mix them up, Airborne and Ripcord, because to me, they're like the same guy. There wasn't a lot of daylight between the two characters to me.
Yes and no, because Airborne was a helicopter infantry or something similar to that, wasn't he?
You'd know better than me. I just always think of them as the same kind of guy. Now, I have learned by going through the show with you, I think we learned that Airborne was actually the first Native American Joe, so that was neat. And I think that I'm about to do it again. Airborne was 83, 84 is Ripcord. I swear I can't keep it straight in my head. And that's part of the problem for me. And it's probably because growing up, A, they felt very similar. They both jump and parachute, right? And B, I didn't own either one of them. So you're going to have a much stronger memory of the ones you owned at the time. So that's probably my problem. I mean, he's cool with me. I don't have any beef with him. He's a blend-in Joe for me. Yeah,
Ripcord is very generic except for his equipment. That's it.
Yeah.
That's really what makes him stand out.
And I'd be lying if I didn't say when I saw Tomorrow Never Dies in the theaters, and was it 1997, I think it came out, and they're like, hey, James Bond's going to do this high-altitude lope, and I was like, Ripcord? I think it was Ripcord. that was the joke for this. So it was kind of neat to have that little buzz memory back for him. It all comes back to G.I. Joe.
I really don't have much more to say about Ripcord other than he had some cool equipment.
Or does it all come back to James Bond? I don't know.
It depends on who you're talking to. To me, it all goes back to G.I. Joe.
Well, you see, in The Living Daylights, there was this part where James is driving the Aston Martin that's all tricked out with missiles and stuff, and he's driving down the snow-covered road, and the bad guys have set up a big roadblock. So that's my segue to talk about roadblock. All right, roadblock. By the way, he uses the missiles to explode the truck. He makes it through. Anyway, let's talk about roadblock. Everyone loves roadblock. All right, another fantastic addition to the G.I. Joe squad. His name will echo in the halls of eternity. Like, if there's a G.I. Joe Hall of Fame, he's in it. We all know he is. Is he the second? No, I was about to say he's the second African-American Joe, but I think Doc was, right? It's Stalker, then Doc, then Roadblock.
Yep.
Man, they're like hitting home runs. Like, Stalker's awesome. Doc is very cool and memorable, and Roadblock is like a fan favorite.
Yeah, whenever they do a relaunch or of toys, Roadblock is always in the top 5.
Oh, yeah. And like when they relaunch the comics, and they're like, we got to pare the team down.
Yep.
He always finds a way in.
Yep.
Anyway, he's the heavy machine gunner. His real name is Marvin F. Hinton. Primary military specialty is infantry heavy weapons. Secondary military specialty is cook, and they get mileage out of that. He is from Biloxi, Mississippi, where I've spent a good amount of time because that's where Air Force communications officer training is. Roadblock's dream was to be a gourmet chef. He was working as a bouncer to earn money to attend the fancy, hard-to-pronounce school name in France when an army recruiter convinced him that the army could train him to be a chef. Roadblock joined but found army menus and preparation techniques too appalling. He transferred into the infantry, qualified expert in the M2 Browning 50 cal, and he's all good to go in all Warsaw Pact heavy machine guns, M16, M1911A auto pistol, all that stuff. A 50 cal Browning weighs 84 pounds and 50 pounds for ammo. Combined total about 134 pounds of steel, generating 2,930 FPS. That's not frames per second. In muzzle velocity, that's feet per second, by the way, 2,930 feet per second at a cyclic rate of 550 RPM, rounds per minute. Anybody who can handle that doesn't need a machine gun to keep me away.
Just so you know, Jarrod, that's what I practice with. That's nothing.
That's not, oh, you're okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's where I'm at. No, not at all.
Jim's out there just lugging around a Browning 50 cal. The Browning 50 cal is really meant to be mounted to something. It's a gun you would mount to a Humvee or an armored vehicle, a tank of some kind. You know, in the old World War II movies, when you got the tank with the big turret, the big gun, but there's like usually a guy on top with an extra machine gun, like, you know, all that stuff. That's what it's meant for. It's not really meant to be carried by hand like Roadblock does it, but it's a brilliant idea to bring in this new Joe who's like extra strong. The thing I kind of like about him is he never had the feel, the sort of Duke replacement to Stalker feel. This could have felt like a replacement for Rock and Roll, because Rock and Roll is the heavy machine gunner on the M60. But I always felt like, whether it was in the comics or maybe the cartoons, I always felt like they played that well. They were big gun bros. They like hanging out with each other, and they made a good duo, and that felt good. Everybody loves Roadblock, right? Is there anybody that doesn't love Roadblock?
I like Roadblock.
Oh, I did forget to describe him. He's got brown pants and a camo-colored sleeveless T-shirt. So he's showing off all of his muscles. He's bald-headed, African-American gentleman with big, big muscles. And he comes with, of course, the Browning 50 cal. Does have a little tripod for it, too, which is nice because it probably gets tired carrying it all the time. And his own ammo box that goes on to the backpack, which is kind of neat. But yeah, what a cool figure. I'm sorry. Back to you and your thoughts on it.
I think I recently read this one getting ready for my next episode. When Roadblock's introduced, they're at General Flagg's funeral. Doesn't Rock and Roll ask him, "Are you my replacement?"
Maybe. It's been a while since I read that one, but I believe you, because I do remember them just handling it pretty well.
Yeah. And Rock and Roll doesn't go away. He was one of Larry's favorite. And Roadblock stays on, too. As you said, they handle it very well, and there are many times they're matched together.
As they should be. They make a neat pairing, being that Roadblock is the southern guy with the muscles and all that, and then Rock and Roll is the California kind of surf guy, also with muscles, you know, and all that. They make a real fun duo. In fact, and I'm getting way down the road here, but eventually they'll introduce another quasi-popular Joe named Heavy Duty, and I believe he's related to Roadblock. I think it's his cousin or his brother.
Is there a Heavy Duty in the 90s?
I want to say the first time I remember seeing a heavy duty was like 01.
Okay.
Like right about when they started launching Devil's Due.
No, that's where I'm remembering it from. When they are chasing the bat, maybe they were playing off of when Roblox first met Rock and Roll. But heavy duty, when they're chasing the bat in the sewers of Chicago, and Roblox asks, "Hey, are you my replacement?"
That's what it was. I remember that now.
As far as Roblox, he was big in the cartoons. I remember rhyming all the time. And
oh yeah,
yes,
that's right.
But he was very loved. They really played him up. Very popular character. All right, so our next one is Spirit and Freedom.
Introducing Duke, Roadblock, and Spirit. G.I.Joe American Hero.
His file name is Charlie Iron Knife. Primary military specialty is infantry. Secondary military specialty is social services. Birthplace, Taos, New Mexico. Spirit comes from a family so far below the poverty line that they never realized that they were poor. He was a hunting guide through high school, served in Southeast Asia, then as a civilian completed his education. Returned to the service for reasons inexplicable to anyone but a Native American mystic warrior. Qualified expert M16, M1911A auto pistol, and Remington sniper rifle. Charlie is a shaman, a medicine man. He's not a healer or a priest or a witch doctor. There isn't any equivalent in our culture for what he is unless we had shrinks that could actually help people. That was a strike at somebody.
Yeah, Larry's always bitter. I forgot to talk about the bitterness of Larry and officers from the Duke file card, but I'll just let it go. Like Larry has bitterness sprinkled throughout these file cards.
Yes. So his uniform got tan pants, a blue shirt, and he came with Freedom, which is a bald eagle. He's got gold wristbands on each arm so Freedom can rest. And he came with a very unique rifle. That was a dart rifle or a bolt rifle. Yeah. I thought it was pretty cool. And his backpack had all of his extra arrows in there. The blue shirt always reminded me of something I couldn't ever put my finger on until I was reading through the Creating G.I. Joe. And it is reminiscent of the cavalry jackets from the 1870s. I'm always looking, I go, what does that remind me of? What does that remind me? And as soon as I read that, I'm like, yep, there it is. Very unique character. I remember him fondly from the Weather Dominator miniseries in the cartoons. And him and Storm Shadow always fighting instead of Snake Eyes, because you got to have somebody that can talk.
Right.
I remember very fondly in the cartoons. He was used pretty well in the comics, too. What do you think?
I think that Spirit Iron Knife, I tend to call him Spirit Iron Knife. That's how he was referred to in a lot of those Devil's Due era, because I think there was a legal thing between that character Spirit and Will Eisner's Spirit.
The issue that he's introduced in, Larry always called him Spirit and Iron Knife also in Marvel Comics.
Okay, that's another place where I probably picked it up. And what a cool name, Spirit Iron Knife. That's a great name. What a great character. Again, they used him real smartly in the cartoon as sort of the Snake Eyes replacement so they could have dialogue banter between him and Storm Shadow, which really helped boost the character. I think it kind of made him more of a warrior. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I think like a Native American warrior is just really cool. And it's like the American version, the North American version of a ninja is the Native American brave warrior. Now, clearly there's been some, looking back into the past and saying, that this character has racial overtones. And I won't lie, they leaned way into the Native American thing. Like we just discovered that Airborne was a lot more subtle with Airborne. He was much more like a soldier would be, right? Now, Spirit definitely has his Native American roots fully on display. So I get where people look at it in hindsight and go, this is borderline racist, or some people would say it would be full on racist, the way they designed him. And, I can't go look through anyone else's lens but my own. But as a kid, I just thought he was the coolest. I thought Native American warriors were to be feared, respected. They were bad. Like, he was super cool to me. Right or wrong on that, however history wants to look back on him. But man, I thought it was neat. And I think it's very cool that they include the Native American in G.I. Joe, because there's a fair amount of Native Americans in the military. I mean, the whole movie Wind Talkers is all about the Navajo Code Talkers that were instrumental to helping us win World War II. Yeah, there's a lot of really cool history around Native Americans in the United States military. There's a lot of not so great history about the United States military and Native Americans, and we can admit that. But I think as of 1984, if there was a good way to bring that in, showcase it, and use it as a source of pride, I think they did a great job. But again, I can only speak for the lens that I looked through.
I can see why people would think this is some racial undertone or whatever. But on the same note, to me, this is what the Native American culture was. A lot of good things that they brought out, not just net bad things. I can see it, but on the same note, I don't think there's anything negative. They leaned into it quite a bit, like you said.
They really did. They leaned way in.
Yeah.
I'm from the military. Did you know that like every helicopter in the military inventory is named after a Native American tribe, like the Apache and the Iroquois, the Kiowa, and all this stuff? And it's meant to be as a source of pride. Everybody can take it how they want.
Looking at the figure, I don't see anything negative. They were just trying to, as you said, they were trying to lift them up and say, hey, this is part of the history of the military.
Yep.
Let's not, veer away from it or shy away from it.
And just as a character, he was awesome. It was very cool.
Oh, yeah. I think we're on to the last G.I. Joe character, aren't we?
I believe we are. I'm going to talk to you about Thunder. Thunder. If you look under F for Forgettable Joes, you will find Thunder. Let's get into talking about Thunder. Self-propelled gun artilleryman is what it says on his card. That's a mouthful. His real name is Matthew Harris Breckenridge. Primary military specialty, artillery. Secondary military specialty, bandsman. He's a drummer. He's from Louisville, Kentucky. Thunder grew up next door to a foundry, a probable explanation for his fondness for loud noises. When asked his reasons for going artillery, his reply was simple. I want to hear them go bang. That's a quote. I want to hear them go bang. He has a passion for heavy metal rock and roll, peanut brittle, and cars with bad mufflers. If you know where you are and you know where the enemy is, then artillery can be an exact science. But in the real world, artillery is half trigonometry and half blind luck. In other words, if you hit something, take the credit. If you miss, write it off as a margin of error. All right, so that is Thunder, who came with the Slugger. I knew it would come to me. The vehicle I don't see very often. I don't remember it from my childhood. I don't know anyone who ever owned it, which may be why I know you've got one. I see you looking around. He's got 3 of them, of course. All right, let me talk to you about what Thunder looks like. He wears like a dark brown tanker suit. It's got some dark green trim on it. The pants might actually be black. I think they are. He's got bright red hair, but I think the neatest thing about Thunder is his helmet visor combo thing that he wears. He came with that. He came with the big monocle looking glass, and I think that was about it. So yeah, to me, Thunder is exceptionally forgettable. I wouldn't, if you had me sit down and write all the G.I. Joe names I could think of, Thunder probably would not have made the list. I didn't know anybody who had it. I didn't have it. I do have a Thunder figure. I don't know where I picked him up, probably at a yard sale or something. Very forgettable Joe to me, probably because I just never had the vehicle or whatever, and I don't remember him being focused on in the comics or cartoon very much. Again, those aren't my expert areas. They're yours. I will give it to you.
He was in a few episodes of the cartoon. Comic, not so much. As you said, he's similar to Ripcord. Very forgettable except for his equipment that he comes with. Very unique headgear that nobody else has. Well, I take that back. Sky Striker from the Tiger Force had that same headgear, I believe. Very forgettable, as you said. Not one of my favorites, not one that people think of.
The curse of the vehicle driver. We talked about it. Some of them rise and some of them don't, and I feel like he's a don't.
And Slugger's not a real popular vehicle either. So the driver's not going to be as popular. Yeah, pretty forgettable. There's not a whole lot to talk about Thunder. So that rolls us into Cobra the Enemy characters. One of, in my opinion, the best lineup of Cobra characters so far and going forward. Very hard to beat this lineup of Cobra figures. And the first one we're going to talk about is the Baroness. I'm sure we're going to talk about the Baroness and her uniform. So the Baroness is her code name, and she is a Cobra intelligence officer, and they give her no name on her file card whatsoever. Not even classified, nothing. Primary military specialty is intelligence. Secondary military specialty, fixed wing pilot, and her birthplace is classified. The spoiled offspring of wealthy European aristocrats, the Baroness graduated from student radicalism into international terrorism and finally into the ranks of Cobra. She was severely burned during a Cobra night attack operation and has had extensive plastic surgery. Rumor has it that she is the only one who knows Destro's secret identity. Qualified expert M16, AK-47, RPG-7, Uzi, and she's a HISS tank operator, which is kind of ironic considering her accident. Her principal weakness is in the division of her loyalty between Cobra Commander and Destro. Her chief strength would seem to lie in her ability to play them against each other. The Baroness has a very sleek, very form-fitting black uniform with a red Cobra logo on her chest and with black hair and the infamous black glasses. And she came with a sniper rifle and a backpack. And as far as the accident that they're talking about in here, everything on this file card came from the comics. Every bit of it. The last episode of Outpost that was released, your brother and I, we talked about these comic issues where she had her accident and she was in the fire at the Night Attack. This is a character that was created by Larry Hama for the comic book. Then she was in the cartoon. And finally, in the third year of the toys, she gets a figure. One of those creations that Larry came up with, and Hasbro said, hey, that's a good idea. And she also carries on the one female character released each year. First year was Scarlet, second was CoverGirl, and now the Baroness. Now that I've rambled on long enough, what do you got?
The Baroness perfected the sexy librarian thing. And I don't know who the plastic surgeon was that did work on her, but he deserves some kind of an award.
Dr. Huntkinder.
Oh, well, he did a great job. I mean, the Baroness is sort of like every G.I. Joe boy's kind of fantasy girl. Like, if you're into the bad girl, like the good girl is like Scarlet. Maybe you like CoverGirl. Maybe you like Lady J. But the bad girl all day long is Baroness. And she's just great. I do get a kick out of kind of going back and looking at the original figures where they hadn't perfected figure molds yet. Her figure mold, kind of like CoverGirl's, is not terribly sexy. It's a little bulky and whatnot, and that's fine because it was the 80s and we weren't really concerned with it. Only as grown men do we know. We go back and notice.
Do we notice the little imperfections, right?
Because I mean, as the time goes by, her molds will get more attractive as time goes by, and they're able to be more precise with molds and whatnot. But yeah, was, and always will be the cover girl. Even though there is a cover girl, the cover girl of G.I. Joe. Something about the bad girl with the librarian look, and she just owns her villainy so much so it's just clicked in my head. You know, we covered a lot of Flash Gordon on Saturday Matinee Theater here. It reminds me of Aura, Ming's daughter. She's sort of that unabashed, she embraces her sexuality, uses it to her advantage at every opportunity. She's very much in that mold.
Yeah, she definitely uses it to her advantage. Now, what I find funny is, for as popular as she was or is, she never got a new figure in the 82 to 94 toy line.
Right, right. She never got a second version like a lot of other people did.
Now, there was, looking at some other books I got, I think it was in Creating G.I. Joe, there was a proposal for it in 95. Of course, the line was canceled. So, yeah, she's very popular. She's one of those characters that you can't have Cobra without the Baroness. You just can't. Yep.
All right. As much as I don't want to move on, we're going to go to the Cobra Stinger Driver, which, by the way, he never even got like a cool name. You know, never. That's his name, Cobra Stinger Driver. Primary military specialty, Stinger Driver, and infantry. Secondary military specialty, artillery and intelligence. There's a multitude of people, so it says birthplace in various countries. And what I find fascinating is grade is 04 or equivalent. That's like a major. So these are higher ranking Cobra guys. The guys they have driving the Stingers are sort of like field grade officers. I didn't know that till I read this just now. Anyway, Cobra officers are frontline fighters who lead Cobra attack units into battle. Many are also believed to be operating as spies at defense plants, nuclear power facilities, etc. All are martial arts experts, masters of disguise, deceit, and demolition. They graduated Cobra Stinger Driver School, qualified expert in AK-47 assault rifle, PM-63 machine pistol, M16, the Ingram M11 submachine gun. Cobra officers are dedicated to destroying G.I. Joe and the American way of life. Beware, they are extremely dangerous enemies. So while the file card is fairly generic, figure is actually pretty cool, I think. He's highly reminiscent of the original Cobra officer, except he has a gray suit and gray helmet. He still sports the red Cobra emblem on the chest. He's got a couple red highlights in his tack gear. Pretty cool looking. So I don't think he came with any accessories. He did not. I think he's got a great look. I never had a Cobra Stinger, which, if I remember correctly, was that like basically a black Vamp with rockets on it?
Basically a repaint of the Vamp Mark 2. There might have been a difference on the hood or something different.
But yeah, I think the driver looks pretty cool.
The only note I have for the Cobra Stinger driver is the repainted troopers look good in gray. Because that's pretty much where they are. This repaint. They do. It looks really good in gray. As you were reading that, the file card jumped out to me. All are martial arts experts, masters of disguise and deceit and demolitions. I'm like, these guys were pretty good. These guys had to work to get to this position.
Yeah, very interesting as I read that. These were very much pretty high level guys out there. And I can kind of get that. It's kind of clever of Cobra to use the driver because he's nimble and he's seen a lot of the battlefield making decisions. You know, it's great that he has those skills to be the driver and monitor the battlefield. So yeah, it's good. It's a good economy of force by Cobra.
This is all part of that world building that Larry continued to do writing these file cards. We'll see it later when we start looking at the eels and the snow serpents. They had to go through certain training to get to each of those. And I just never realized that was one of them, that they had to work through the training to get to where they were at.
Pretty sweet.
Pretty cool. All right. Next one is Copperhead, the water moccasin driver, or pilot is what they're calling him. File name is classified. Birthplace unknown. Military specialty, air driver swamp vehicle operator. It is presumed that Copperhead is native to or otherwise intimately familiar with the Florida Everglades. Intelligence sources venture a guess that he raced speedboats in high-stakes races in Monaco and Japan. His favorite weakness is gambling. Odds are that he got started by placing bets on his own races. Apparently, he compounded his folly by selling his services to Cobra in hopes of paying off his bookies. Gung Ho says, "I sure as I know the type. They're all around the Gulf Coast, trash, drifters. They can drive a swamp buggy like the devil himself, rebuild a V8 with a coat hanger and spit, fight all night and raise Cain till the cock crows. They got a heart full of gimme and a mouth full of much oblige." And his figure design is a teal or blue uniform with padded inside. They're more of a lime green with a helmet reminiscent of a kind of a cobra with a mask on and with a silver Cobra logo. And there were 2 different variations with 2 different color gloves. That's what I got on Copperhead. What do you got?
I like Copperhead a lot. And to me, he's one of those vehicle drivers that does rise a bit above. I think he got a fair amount of cartoon time, a little comic book time. And I think what really separates him from, say, the Stinger is, you had Stinger driver, and there's multiple Stinger drivers. There's just one Copperhead. Even though he does drive the water moccasin, it's just the one guy. And I think that really helps rise him up above a lot of the other Cobra vehicle drivers. But yeah, he has a great look. He has a very cool look. The moccasin's a cool vehicle. They get a good amount of mileage out of him in various media. So yeah, I've always thought thumbs up to Copperhead. A lot of it, I think, has to do with his design. It's a good one. Very
unique colors and scheme. And I always liked his voice and accent in the cartoon. Very, very thick accent in the cartoon.
I'm trying to remember. Was it like Southern Cajun?
Yep.
Something? Okay.
And that's how, whenever I see him in the comics, you don't see him in the comics very often. Oh, do you see him in the comics?
I feel like I've seen him a couple times.
Maybe in Devil's Due or IDW. But I don't know that he was ever in Marvel Comics. I'll do some research, or I'll just cut that all out.
Whatever. No, leave it in. Leave it in. Because here's what we do on our show. Hey, if you're listening out there,
there you go.
And we're talking to you, Gary V, Scotty Cameron. We usually mention you, Jim the Joe Junkie.
Yeah.
If any of these guys are listening, they'll tell us. We need to know about Copperhead showing up in Marvel continuity. Oh, I wonder who we should talk about next. Oh, it's my favorite villain of all time. Unless you got anything else on Copperhead, sir.
No, let's move on.
All right, it's my number 1 Cobra villain. I'm so glad I get to talk about him. It is Firefly. Firefly is the Cobra, and I'll try to say it like Pat does, Saboteur. File name is classified. I think it remains that way to this day. Primary military specialty is sabotage, demolitions, and terror. Birthplace classified. No one knows what Firefly's real name is or what he looks like. He is known by his work. Expert in all NATO and Warsaw Pact explosives and detonators. Always places his charges in one place that affords maximum damage. There's no question about his infiltration skills since no one has ever reported seeing him enter or leave any target area. Keep that in mind when I talk to you about my Firefly story, folks. Even Cobra Commander doesn't know much about Firefly. His fees are paid into a numbered Swiss bank account and are always payable in advance. He makes no guarantees and gives no refunds. Now, the most important part is Firefly's figure design. This is why he's always been my favorite. He's basically Snake Eyes with sort of a gray camouflage suit. All right, just imagine Snake Eyes wearing gray camo. Came with a submachine gun, a backpack that had a cool little cover you could take off to see all of his extra tools, and a little walkie-talkie. Man, he is just the business. I always wanted this figure. Wanted it real bad.
How bad did you want it, Jarrod?
Well, I might have done some nefarious things that only Firefly would do to get it. So, yeah, when I was like 4th grade, we lived in Texas, and there's this one kid who had like everything G.I. Joe. So much so they had a shed, one of those pre-built sheds you could go buy from Lowe's, out in their backyard, and that was literally full of G.I. Joe vehicles. They had made like plaster of Paris battle areas, you know, with hills and all this stuff. They made like 3-dimensional battle spaces to play on in there. This kid was clearly spoiled and needed to be brought down a peg or two. So one night in the dark of the night, I snuck out. I went over, snuck into said shed. And here's the thing. I didn't even know this kid. It wasn't like a friend of mine or anybody I even knew. So it made me feel less bad. It was like lore about this kid's shed. So I snuck in there and I saw the shed and it was everything I was told it would be. And I saw a Firefly sitting there and I swiped him. And that's the Firefly I still have to this day. So all I'm saying is, you know, I don't encourage this behavior out there, folks. And if you are the kid that had it stolen, just let us know. You know, hit us up, contact longboxcrusade.com, and I'll be happy to replace your Firefly. But you are going to have to answer a couple of questions that only that kid would know. So don't even think about trying to scam me. I'm talking to you, Gary V.
So you saboteured the Cobra Saboteur.
Yes, I did. I totally did. Yeah,
we're just a couple of felons.
We are. That's right. You stole from Meyer. Was that it?
Yeah.
Tripwire.
Yep.
Yeah, we're a bunch of rotten kids, man.
Firefly. He's similar to Snake Eyes, like you said. Still some mystery around his name, where he was born, and that type of stuff. And he's just a cool looking figure. I don't know how you can't look at that guy and go, I want him.
Yes.
You know,
he's definitely in league with Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow.
Yeah.
And let me ask you a question before you go on real quick, because I was under the impression that they brought Firefly into the whole ninja camp, Arishikage style, in Devil's Due, or is that something they planned it in Marvel? Because I've heard conflicting. I always thought it was a Devil's Due, but somebody said, "Oh, I think it actually happened in Marvel." What's the true story?
It started in Marvel issue, I want to say 126.
Oh, okay, way up there in the ones I haven't read.
Yeah.
So that would explain why I thought it was Devil's Due.
As I was studying up for this, I was trying to remember exactly what it was. And again, correct me if I'm wrong. I thought it was Firefly was the original person that was supposed to go in and kill the Hardmaster. And he realized, hey, I can't do it. So that's when he brought Zartan in. Again, this was kind of a rewrite after Zartan already been kind of starting to go back on the good guy's side. Again, I believe that was issue 126, 127. That story was played out. Something similar to that. So again, guys, let me know if I'm close. Because it's been a while since I've read those issues in the Marvel run. So, and then they carried it on into, like you said, the Devil's Due era. When I believe I was on that Chronicles when we talked about that. With Snake Eyes,
it must have been you who said that. Yep. It's probably where I started getting muddled, because I think it was probably you who said, I think it might have been in Marvel.
Yep. All right. Any other mischievous stories you have about Firefly other than him being really cool with that toolkit backpack and cell phone?
No, I only swiped him once, my friend.
Okay. And you kept him all these years?
Still in my cabinet.
Kept the evidence. All right. So the next one we're going to talk about is a mail-away figure of Cobra Commander V2, a.k.a. the Hooded Cobra Commander. His code name is Enemy Leader. His file name Classified. Primary military specialty Intelligence. His secondary military specialty is Ordnance, Experimental Weaponry, hence the hair dryer gun on it that he has. Birthplace Classified, and his grade is Commander-in-Chief. Absolute power. Total control of the world. Its people, wealth, and resources. That's the objective of Cobra Commander. This fanatical leader rules with an iron fist. He demands total loyalty and allegiance. His main battle plan for world dominance relies on revolution and chaos. He has personally led uprisings in the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and other trouble spots, responsible for kidnapping scientists, businessmen, and military leaders, then forcing them to reveal their top-level secrets. Cobra Commander is hatred and evil personified, corrupt, a man without scruples, probably the most dangerous man alive. His character or in uniform is a dark blue uniform. I believe it's a straight repaint of the original, just a darker color, with a hood with a couple eyes cut out. In the cartoon, he would switch back and forth depending on what he was doing. Thoughts on Cobra Commander Hooded?
Oh, I love it, man. Like I said, there's a mail away that made me feel very special because I was like the only kid who had one. And I didn't leave mine out in no shed. I'll tell you that for nothing. But yeah, I still have that Hooded Cobra Commander to this day. Very much a big fan. In this case, I have to laugh at the whole modern thoughts. You know, people are like, oh, Hooded Cobra Commander, we shouldn't do Hooded because it conjures up images of hatred. And I'm like, he's the bad guy. He should conjure up.
Yes.
You should not like what you see. But that's just me. I think it is a very menacing look. That look is a little scary and you shouldn't like it. And we've seen Cobra Commander both mirror helmet and hooded, like you said, in the cartoon, in the comic book, the switches back and forth. I always thought of hooded as more like sitting around the house. The helmet is when he's on the battlefield and whatever. And man, there's been some really good drawings of the Hooded Cobra Commander. I think of when he was in the black outfit with the red rain coming down on IDW.
Yep.
And I think he's great. And now we'll get away from the heavy stuff of I think he's supposed to look evil. So by all means, have a Hooded Cobra Commander. But again, I can only look at life through my own personal lens. So let's get away from that, though. And you mentioned the gun, the hair dryer gun. Like what? When I was a kid or when you were a kid, what did you... That was the same gun that I think came with mirrored face Cobra Commander.
Yes.
What did you think it did?
I don't know. I never had a Cobra Commander battle or helmet or hooded.
Okay. I always thought there was like a whole bunch of like mini rockets. Like James Bond had the mini rocket in his cigarette. It always goes back to Bond. In a cigarette, and you only live twice. Like I always thought it was a whole bunch of mini rockets kind of on a cylinder that he could, like do one at a time, or he could do a rapid fire. I don't know. I don't know what they were going for, but that's what I thought it was.
Well, it's an experimental gun, so it can be whatever you want it to be.
Apparently.
Yeah, I really don't have a lot of memories of this guy other than in the cartoon because I never had him. I wasn't fancy enough to get a mail-away figure, so.
That's a hard life. Now, you're a big Joe collector and something of a dealer. Now, do you have one now? I assume you have to come across one. Right?
I do. I have a Hooded Cobra Commander. I had a helmeted one, but he was in really good condition, and I obtained one in less condition. I sold the one that was in better condition because I could get more money for it. So.
Oh, okay.
But I'm not one of those collectors that has to be in pristine condition.
Me neither.
Having it is what I count.
The only guys I'm like looking to replace, and I think I only have one right now, and I think it's the guy who came with the USS Flag. Is that Keelhaul?
Yeah, Keelhaul.
I need to replace him just because his legs are so loose. Because all my guys are on standing up. His legs are so loose he won't stand up. I think my leather neck is like that too.
So let's move on to another what I think is a cool character.
And I wholeheartedly agree.
Is
Scrap Iron. Yes, I love Scrap Iron. Much like you got that as a gift for being in a wedding, I remember getting this as a gift from an aunt of mine, an alt, if you will. And man, she was always good at getting, like, she was just kind of guess. She was one of these aunts that just guessed at what I would like. She was such a good guesser. Okay. She got me this Scrap Iron. She got me a really cool VHS tape, circa like 87, 88, where it was like, showed you the tricks and stuff of various Nintendo games. Man, she got me the coolest stuff. But let's focus on Scrap Iron. He's Cobra's anti-armor specialist. His name's classified. His military specialty, tank destroyer. Birthplace classified. It is believed that Scrap Iron is a product designer for Destro's armaments company. He carries out initial field testing on all new armor-piercing munitions and submunitions. Area of specialization is remote-launched, laser-guided, rocket-propelled, piezo-electric-fused anti-tank weapons. Did I get all that? These weapons are categorized beyond the smart stage and are known by the nomenclature brilliant. Scrap Iron is methodical and precise. Imperfection in any form repels him. Perhaps that's why he wants to blow up the world. That is Scrap Iron, and let me tell you what he looks like. He looks pretty cool. He rocks the blue and red, His main outfit is blue. He's got like a red vest over it, red boots, red tech gear, a lot of black highlights in there. He's got a couple grenades on his chest. His helmet's black. His gloves are black. So it's a real red, blue, black mixture. Not only is that cool, but I think he's definitely elevated by the fact that he comes with a 2 missile launcher with a stand and a little remote detonator for it and everything. Like it's like a wired detonator for it and a pistol. So yeah, I always thought this guy was super cool, especially because he came with a missile launcher and he's got a good look. Back to you, Jim.
I remember this figure particularly as one of the first that I remember picking up for myself, going to the store and getting him. And I've got him because he came with so much stuff and he looked cool. The colors really blended well together. That black rocket launcher. I really like this guy. He's one of my favorites. In the comics, he was actually the one that killed the Softmaster and injured Billy in that car. And I don't know that if it's ever been brought up by some of the other characters that, Firefly was there, gave the order, but Scrap Iron is the one that actually did it.
It's amazing he's still alive. The Snake Eyes of Storm Shadow hasn't killed him yet.
Yeah. I like that they mentioned he was part of Mars, Destro's company. And as we talked about on the sub-team episode, I count him as an Iron Grenadier, tying everything together. Larry just tying all that stuff together. Moving on, I get to talk about
one of the lesser-known members of the...
Yeah, nobody's ever heard of him. Some guy named Storm Shadow? Something like
Sounds
that. I don't
dumb.
know. Yeah, I don't know what they were thinking. They should have named him Ghost Shadow or something. Oh, wait, they almost did.
Oh!
So, we're going to talk about Storm Shadow, who is the Cobra Ninja. Primary military specialty, assassin. Secondary military specialty, intelligence. And birthplace is classified. Storm Shadow can trace his family history through 30 generations of assassins. He can scale sheer walls with bare hands and feet, move with blinding speed, and endure unspeakable hardship and pain. Qualified expert, longbow, samurai sword, throwing stars, nunchaku sticks, 8th degree black belt in 5 martial arts. The great ninja assassin clans disappeared 100 years ago. If they were wiped out, nobody took the credit for it, and if they're still around, who are they working for? So Storm Shadow is in a white, what's the proper gi? Is that the proper word?
Is ninja outfit.
Ninja outfit. There you go. Ninja outfit. And he came with some very unique weapons, the nunchucks, a couple swords, the longbow, and a backpack that can hold them all. And he's got the red Cobra logo on his left chest area. And he's got some throwing stars and some knives molded in. Very unique. We could go on for a long time about his history with Snake Eyes and Stalker, which that round of comics is coming up with issue 21. We'll be talking about that. And he's just a cool character. You can't have G.I. Joe or Cobra without Storm Shadow. He's one of those characters that has been on both teams.
Storm Shadow's greatest thing that he did for G.I. Joe was really elevate Snake Eyes. He took Snake Eyes from an interesting ninja commando to a whole other level of storytelling. Like this character, this creation of Storm Shadow. It's funny to read his file card because you can tell by reading that Larry hasn't quite figured out what he wants to do with him yet. In fact, he's talking about an entire clan, perhaps, that's hidden away. And maybe that counts as the Red Ninjas from 21, but what we're really going to find out is how important he is to Snake Eyes lore and how important they are to each other. And it's going to become so much the story of G.I. Joe that it's what most people remember. And I mean, at some point, the book got called like Snake Eyes and His Ninja Friends featuring G.I. Joe or something like that,
Pretty close.
Yeah, I mean, it became all about the ninja. And ninja were so popular in the 80s. If you're listening and you're a younger listener, like I know Scotty Cameron's younger, so he doesn't necessarily remember the 80s. Ninjas were a big part of pop culture. Like there was a motorcycle called the Ninja. There was the American Ninja movies. It was ninjas, and G.I. Joe played a big part in that. And Storm Shadow definitely did. And then once Larry figures out how to use him and says, oh, they served in Vietnam, him and Stalker and Snake Eyes. And what brilliant storytelling to say that, he's head of this ninja clan and Snake Eyes comes back from Vietnam. His entire family's killed on the way to the airport to pick him up. So he has nobody. So his buddy Tommy says, come live with me, heal with me. And because he has nobody, Snake Eyes studies harder and works harder and out ninjas this great ninja, which creates this huge rift between them. And man, it'd be great if they made a movie like that. Unfortunately, they never did. Back to you, Jim.
Yes, what a great movie that would have been. The story was right there.
It was right there.
Instead, they
Welcome to
didn't
Bitter
do that.
Podcast.
And they, anyway.
Well, welcome to Jarrod and Jim Get Bitter.
Talk about that story between Storm Shadow, Snake Eyes is, and I don't know if they intentionally did it to begin with, but Snake Eyes, the good guy, is black. Storm Shadow is white. It's usually the bad guys are black and the good guys are white. So
the old cowboy movies, black hat, white hat type thing. Yeah.
Yes. And it was really cool how they did that. Originally, Snake Eyes figure was black because they were trying to save money.
Right.
But the way they built upon that and used that as a storyline or story point was great.
I wonder how much of a hand Larry had into that Storm Shadow figure design. Like, did he say he needs to be a white ninja because he needs to contrast with Snake Eyes, the black ninja?
I don't know because at this time Ron Rudat was doing a lot of designs, and I don't know how much Larry Hama had say in it, but it did say that Ron Rudat wanted that contrast of the bad guy being white.
They're probably seeing eye to eye on that.
Yeah. So to get more in depth into the story, stay tuned for future episodes as we go through the comic book and discuss 21, the next comic episode, and then the following comic episode we'll be doing 26, 27, which is the Snake Eyes origin. It'll be a few months down the road, but that's where we really dig in.
21 is what just changed, I think, the comic series forever.
Yes. At the time, people didn't realize how revolutionary it was. But then as time went on, people realized it was a great mastery of storytelling. What's up next, Jarrod?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Next up is my brother, the Wild Weasel Skull. All right, let's talk about Wild Weasel. Wild Weasel, man, I'm getting a lot of cool ones here. Wild Weasel is the Cobra Rattler pilot. We've talked about elevating vehicle drivers, and the key to that in Cobra is to, be a one-off. So, Wild Weasel, Cobra Rattler pilot. File name, classified, military specialty, ground support pilot. Birthplace, classified. Wild Weasel cut his teeth in the bus wars of South America and Africa during the last decade. His knowledge of close support aircraft ranges from jury-rigged civilian conversions to ultra state-of-the-art flying weapons platforms. A mouth injury inflicted during a strafing run is rumored to be the cause of the characteristic sibilance in his speech pattern. Wild Bill says he may be a back-shooting, low-down snake in the grass, but the boy can fly like nobody's business. You got to respect the skunk for that. Hey, what did Voltaire say? To forgive our enemy their virtues, that is the greatest miracle. That's deep thoughts by Wild Bill. Wild Bill reads Voltaire. Anyway, let's talk about Wild Weasel. Another great design. It's pretty much a standard flight suit, just in red, with a lot of black trim. We're talking black boots, black gloves, black tack gear, a little blue sort of scarf thing, a little ascot type of blue sticking out from his chest. He's got the red helmet with the black visor. I always like the attention to detail because my dad was an Army pilot, and they'd often have their maps and their mission boards on their legs, on their thighs like that for easy reference, and they'd actually be strapped on so that when you're flying around, they don't flop everywhere. They got right there, and that's included on the figure. So, yeah, another great design. I had the Rattler. I had Wild Weasel. I loved it. My Sky Striker and my Rattler would go at it all the time, man, and it was a good time indeed. Great character design. Back to you, Jim.
Couple things. The map on his leg, do you know what that is a map of?
I've never really looked at it that hard. What is it?
Cincinnati, Ohio. What other toy company is based in Cincinnati, Ohio?
Ooh, which one is it?
Kenner was in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Oh, so they're doing a bombing run on Kenner.
Absolutely.
I love it. I had a feeling.
That was the 3 3/4 with Star Wars. They were competing. Secondly, and this is a jab at yours and Jason's toy collecting or toy gifting. So you had the Sky Striker.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't even get the Rattler?
Nope, that was mine. I had all the good stuff, man.
I guess. Going back to the figure, Wild Weasel, great design. Love the red. Contrast between the red and the black. I never had a Rattler or a Wild Weasel, but I always wanted one. I've got a partial now. I'm still trying to complete.
It's such a good design that they've had 6 versions of it in 3 3/4, And none of the subsequent versions can hold a candle to the original. Now, I will say version 6, which came out in 2008, is really good, but still the original version, still the best.
Yeah, it's hard to top perfection. All right, we are going to move on to the last one, and that is the Master of Disguise himself, Zartan.
He's an evil master of disguise. Zartan changes color right before your eyes. Zartan.
Codename Zartan. File name unknown. Aliases too numerous to list. And birthplace unknown. Zartan can alter his skin color at will to blend in with his environment. He is also a master of makeup and disguise, a ventriloquist and linguist, over 20 languages and dialects, an acrobatic contortionist, and a practitioner of several mystic martial arts. Very little is known of his background and origins, but most security agencies agree that he must have had European military academy training, possibly St. Cyr. Psychological profile, extreme paranoid schizophrenic, grows into various multiple personalities to such an extent that the original personality becomes buried and forgotten. As far as the figure, he had some brown pants with some shin guards and some thigh guards, a half shirt that covered his upper body, and a hood with some black, what I'm assuming is paint over his eyes that kind of gave him a very distinguished, very mysterious look. He came with a backpack that had a face mask so he could be in disguise. Oh, yeah. And he changed color in the sun, too.
Oh, yeah.
So this is really the first foray into the mystic or the science fiction type. In this file card, there's no mention of Dreadnoks. He was not going to be the Dreadnok until the following year when the Dreadnoks were released. The 3 original, Buzzer, Ripper, and Torch.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Zartan?
Got this one from that aunt, by the way. And I like how they classify him like on yojo.com as a vehicle driver. And it's the same way that Destro was like a vehicle driver when he came with the air chariot. Like it was just a little piece of equipment to like pump up this figure that everybody was going to want. And everybody wanted him because he did the color change in the sun. I feel like did the vehicle do a little color change in the sun as well, or did it stay the same?
I think it did.
I just remember running out and setting this in my driveway. I was living here in the same town this was in 2nd grade, same town I live in now. I could drive to that spot right now where I set down Zartan and that chameleon to sit there and soak up the sun. I do remember like thinking it would be instantaneous. As a kid, I was like, why isn't it changed? And I had to leave it out there for, a good few minutes while it did its thing. But man, it was pretty cool. Yeah, this is definitely where G.I. Joe spins into the kind of weirdly mystical. I think what we don't talk about enough is the face mask that he came with so that he could turn into Sean Connery whenever he wanted to. And that's kind of cool.
Back to James Bond again.
It's always back to James. This is more of a Zardoz Sean Connery thing. Interesting that you pointed out that he's not technically the leader of the Dreadnoks at this point. But I do think he's a cool character. We just covered in an episode of G.I. Joe Chronicles, America's Elite, that may or may not be out by the time this one comes out. They had a quick glimpse, like a 3-page glimpse into his childhood, which is super rare because the coolest thing about Zartan is that he's been so many people that like he can't remember who he was. I don't know. He's fascinating. He's fascinating and weird and just weird and fascinating.
That was a good issue of the America's Elite.
Very good. Yeah, I think we all scored it very high, as you will soon find out.
One thing you touched on was he came with a vehicle. This is the start of Hasbro creating a deluxe figure. After this point, there was a deluxe figure every year.
Oh, so like the Destro with the chariot is the deluxe figure? Okay.
Yep. 85 may be the exception, but 85 has the twins. Then 86, you have Serpentor. 87, Zanzibar.
Yes.
88, Destro. 89, Darklon. 90 in the Overlord. So they started that. Charge a little bit more money for this inexpensive vehicle. We can make more money.
Yeah, I remember was it called the Chameleon?
Yeah.
The little bike he had was pretty flimsy. It was not a lot to it.
Didn't help that you were supposed to take it apart and put it in that box.
Oh.
There was a box that came with the Chameleon, and that was part of the deception was he'd take that apart, you'd snap the skis on the bottom of the box, and he could pull his parts with him.
Oh, yeah, I missed that entirely.
Oh, okay.
I was like, get it into the sun as quick as possible.
Now, very unique. Again, you can't have Cobra without Zartan. And as we go forward in the comics, you can't have some of the history of Storm Shadow, Snake Eyes without Zartan as well. Now that we've reviewed and reacquainted ourselves with the figures from 1984, it is time to choose our personal top 3 Joes or Cobras from this year. Scratch that. We're going to go with the top 5. This year is too good to try and choose just 3. And you and I might pull a Pat and add a couple as we go. So, Jarrod, what are your top 5 figures/characters?
Man, this is so tough. All right. Firefly is my favorite Cobra. He's got to be in there. He's number 1. Storm Shadow at number 2. Hooded Cobra Commanders at 3. Baroness at 4. Zartan at 5. And man, honorable mentions to Wild Weasel, Spirit, Scrap Iron, Blowtorch, Recondo, Stinger Driver, Copperhead.
So, yeah, we'll just keep going. And that's probably why it took us so long, because this year is packed full of good characters.
Very exciting characters to talk about. I'm assuming Thunder is at your number 1 spot.
Thunder isn't even on my list. He's not, just because I mentioned him, it's the only way he was going to get mentioned. He's not an honorable mention.
Hey, if Thunder's in your top tier of 1984, hit us up at Longbox Crusade on X, Facebook, or Instagram. We want to know.
And tell us why.
Yes, we won't mock you. We want to meet the Thunder fan out there.
Yeah. All right. Top 5 from 5 on down. 5 is Mutton Junkyard. 4, Spirit. 3, Zartan. 2, Scrap Iron. And Storm Shadow number 1. And
no Firefly. This list is BS.
I know. With honorable mentions, Firefly, Blowtorch, Copperhead. It was hard to leave Firefly off. But because of my memories and some of the things that came with it, I had to. Sorry,
I have
Jarrod.
memories and things that come with Firefly as well. They're not all great.
Just a real quick, strongest impression of this entire line, Jarrod. What do you have?
Just looking at it from a macro view, like I said, I think this is really where G.I. Joe has blown up in popularity to where it starts to begin to expand beyond a military toy line and gets a little more science fiction. Look at Zartan as your prime example. The colors start to get a little brighter. The characters start to get a little more out there. We talked about Spirit and his, controversial design. It's bright and it's colorful and it's memorable. And I think he's cool. But again, that's me. This is where they really start to branch out. And it's really going to gain a foothold. This is going to be the premier toy to collect. I think this is the toy series that actually dethrones He-Man as the number 1 toy. And
I'm okay with that.
I am too. I mean, I love He-Man. My wife collects He-Man and She-Ra, and I think they're great. I think they are fantastic. But I'm more of a Joe guy. Came from a military family. So yeah, this is where it starts to get a little wonky, a little less authentic, but that's sort of the injection of fun. Because as I've said on a bunch of occasions, having been the son of a soldier and been in the military myself and served in Iraq, when I pick up a military book at this point, I don't want realism. I want fun. I've lived the realism and it's not fun. I want the fun version. Anytime a movie comes out and they go, this is the best, most realistic portrayal of the war in Iraq you'll ever see, I'm not going to go see that movie. I'm just going to take a hard pass on it. I want to see this bonkers when I want to watch it. This is where we turn that corner into real fun. And I think the biggest pin we have to put in that mat, Jim, and we hit this point home, is Storm Shadow. Storm Shadow is going to change everything because it's going to change how we view Snake Eyes, everything moving forward.
Great designs. As you said, it stretches that realism a little bit. This is where Larry Hama can really take these characters and he's starting to build that world, reading these file cards. Great characters, great design. It has to be in the top 5 of best years of G.I. Joe.
Absolutely.
Listeners, let us know what your top 5 favorite characters from 1984 are. Also, what are some of your overall memories from this lineup in 84?
Yeah, shout us out at Longbox Crusade on X, Facebook, Instagram. We want to know your top 5. We want to know where you stole your Firefly from. These are the questions and the answers.
Inquiring minds want to know. We still have a little bit of the show left. We're going to move on to our final segment called Military Surplus.
Now I know.
And knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe!
Here at the Outpost, on each episode, besides discussing the toys, comics, and cartoons of the highlighted year, we discuss a peripheral item related to G.I. Joe. This episode, we are going to be discussing some of the G.I. Joe video games, going all the way back to 1983 for the Atari 2600. The first game we're going to be discussing is a G.I. Joe Cobra Strike for the Atari 2600, made by Parker Brothers in 1983. A description from the game instructions: defend and fire. That's your mission in this battle between the G.I. Joes and their archenemy Cobra. Cobra, an evil organization determined to take over the world, now slithers back and forth over the G.I. Joe training camp in the form of a giant Cobra snake. And that means danger for the G.I. Joe recruits running for shelter between the training building and headquarters. As with most Atari games, the box art is exceptional. A giant snake with rock and roll running away from the laser beams, shooting out of the giant snake's eyes, not snake eyes. There are 2 decals or cartridge styles for this game, a grayscale logo that simply says G.I. Joe Cobra Strike, and the second one is a colored copy of the box art. About a month ago, I picked up a copy of the full-color decal cartridge of this game for my personal collection. I don't think I've ever played this game. If I did, I don't remember. Jarrod, what about you?
Yeah, I know of its existence. I feel like I saw ads for it maybe in a comic book. Definitely would have loved to have it. I never owned an Atari 2600. Some of my friends did. I saved up money from mowing lawns and all that stuff to buy my first video game system, which was the Nintendo Entertainment System in like 1988. Yeah, I missed out on 2600. Some of my friends had them, but I don't think anybody had the G.I. Joe game. Definitely a cool looking box art, like you said. It definitely looks interesting in the way that most 2600 games look interesting. You got to use more imagination, but it does look kind of cool. So
I had a 2600 and I never played this.
But hey, you own it now.
I own it now. I just got to get an Atari system. I come across every now and then, so I may push a little bit harder to get one now.
All right, then the second game we're going to discuss is G.I. Joe by Epix for the Apple II and the Commodore 64/128, released in 1984. There were 2 different styles of gameplay. One was a melee style between characters, and the second was a vehicle-on-vehicle gameplay. You could choose from 16 different Joes: Duke, Scarlet, Recondo, Torpedo, Snake Eyes, Roadblock, Spirit, Zap, Gung Ho, Snow Job, Blowtorch, Stalker, Ace, Wild Bill, Stealer, and Clutch. And you could choose from 8 Cobras: Destro, the Baroness, Zartan, Firefly, Cobra Commander, Storm Shadow, Major Blood, and Scrap Iron. The vehicles you could use were the Sky Striker, the Vamp Mark II, the Mobat, the Dragonfly, and the Hiss Tanks. What's most impressive is that when I was researching this game was the graphics and the details of the characters on the vehicle selection screens. Also, the types of weapons you could choose from have an effect on how your characters perform. And, you know, I think that's typical of a lot of the more PC-based. This was an Apple and Commodore. They were making the most out of their graphics capabilities, which were a cut above your home game. Same as today for the most part. Well, we've kind of reached the point where they're merging. But you know what I'm saying? Back then, computer games were always slightly better. And especially on those kind of map selection screens, they could really showcase. So that made sense.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that because I have a feeling that you would more into that or knowledge of that than I did. And I wonder if that was why. It was because of computer-based instead of Atari or base. And when I looked at this, I'm like, wow, that's pretty good graphics. And you could look at those characters and go, yeah, that's Firefly. That's Destro.
I haven't seen this particular G.I. Joe game, but I did an entire, several hour audio documentary going through the history of James Bond video games. It all comes back to James Bond. This is why I discovered too, a lot of the games that were on the PC, when PCs just started feeling out games and about this time, 84, 85, 86, this is what I was noticing too. I was like, man, these graphics are not bad for the era because, you could push things a little harder with the PC, especially if you had a better system.
I would like to own a copy of it just because I'd like to have a copy of it. I don't think I ever will own an Apple II that I could play it on. Just having a copy of it would be pretty neat. Stuff we missed back in the day. The third one we're going to discuss is the first one that I know I remember, and that is the first G.I. Joe Nintendo game by Taxon, released in early 1991. Each mission was broken into 3 levels. The first level, your team of Joes would travel to the Cobra base. The second level, the Joes would plant bombs and then escape before they would explode. And the third is your escape from the Cobra territory. So some things that I saw, and Jarrod, you can break in. I don't know if you played this game back in the day. You could choose 2 of the 3 Joes to use for each mission. One was automatically, depending on what territory you were in. Some of the characters you could choose from were impressive. I say impressive as in kind of a deep cut. You had Blizzard, V2 Rock and Roll, Captain Gridiron, Duke, and version 3 Snake Eyes. And some of the Vipers you fought the Laser Vipers, the Rock Vipers, even a Cobra La Royal Guard. Who would have thought? And some of the bosses, Raptor, Voltar, V2 Destro, and Overlord. Some crazy picks, but they were trying to sell the toys with this also.
You know, I have a ginormous collection of Nintendo games, like 500 NES cartridges in my collection that I've gotten pretty much strictly from yard sale finds over the years. And I know of these G.I. Joe games, but gosh dang it, I've never found them. I don't have either, not to spoil anything that's coming up. I don't have either one of them, and I haven't got the chance to play them. So, yeah, these make my heart sad that maybe one day I will find them and add them to my NES collection.
I was just going to mention that with this game and with the next one we talked about, I broke one of my rules of finding stuff in the wild. I went on eBay and bought both of these probably 6 or 7 years ago on eBay.
What, did you win the lottery or something? Because like
no,
I never see them for less than about $70. That's like that's a good deal too.
I got both of them for $60.
Oh, you done good then. I mean, I'm looking at one right now that's $60 with free shipping, but the label's all scratched. Like
my copy of this first game, the label's half gone.
Okay,
it still plays. I don't care.
You. Yeah,
but the second one is really good copy. I think it was around tax time, and I asked my wife, I said, "Hey, can I, get this?" She's like, "Yeah, go ahead." So I like to find stuff in the wild, but I wanted these, and I said, I'm going to get them. Because I remember these games being hard. That is one thing. You not playing them, but these games are difficult. I don't think I've beaten either one of them. Very nostalgic. I remember sitting at home with my brother trying to play this game, getting to a certain point, writing the password down, save it so we can keep on going. And
I think as a Joe fan and a Nintendo fan that those two lines would have crossed for me by now. They just haven't.
Well, you're not getting my copies.
Right. Well, let me regale you guys with the fourth and last game we're going to discuss. And as we mentioned, it's the second release for the Nintendo Entertainment System, the G.I. Joe The Atlantis Factor, released by Capcom in late 91, early 92. This one's very similar to the previous release. One major change was that you could choose the path you take to Cobra Commander, and some of the characters to choose from have changed as well. Characters except Snake Eyes and Spirit are in the 1992 version, and you can choose from General Hawk, Snake Eyes in his 1991 uniform, Spirit from the Slaughter's Marauders version, Wetsuit, Storm Shadow, and Roadblock. Some of the Cobras are Overkill, Cesspool, Firefly, Major Blood, Destro, and Cobra Commander. And I never played it. We already talked about it. Sad story. No need to belabor. So you've played them both?
Yes, I've played them both.
All right, which one's better?
I would have to say, again, not beating either one of them. I like this one better because you can choose the path that you take.
Okay.
It's not as linear. The levels are still the same. Play is very similar. If you notice, the first one was Taxon. This one was Capcom. But they pretty much just copied it and put different characters in some similar levels. I would say I like this one better.
All right.
So, Jarrod, you haven't played any of them.
No.
Which one piques your interest? So which one would you play first? If you had the system and the game in front of you, which one would you put in?
You know, even though I'm a big Nintendo guy, I'm most intrigued by the Commodore 64 one. The Apple, I think it was also on the Apple II or something like that. But yeah, that because at least I have some familiarity with the other two. I've seen screenshots and ads, and like I kind of know what I'm getting there. With the Commodore version, I got nothing. So I would probably take a peek at that.
It would be interesting. Maybe one day I'll come across the Commodore and I'll have to buy that game off of eBay.
Yeah, if you don't mind disc only in a sleeve, like I said, it's about $20.
That's not bad. All right. Anything on the video games before we close?
Just gotta find those Nintendo games. Do you keep yours out in a shed or?
No, mine are in the house. Sorry.
Saboteur.
If I see a Firefly sitting on my desk in the Outpost, I'll know what happened. All right. In closing, any thoughts, Jarrod? Overall.
Just that this was a great year. 84 was such a great year for G.I. Joe and maybe pop culture in general. I mean, 84 launched this kind of, like we said, incredible turn in G.I. Joe, especially with Storm Shadow. It's the year of Ghostbusters. I think it's the year of Beverly Hills Cop, Karate Kid. Take me back, brother. Take me back.
Yeah, and what's funny is the Karate Kids got a series. Ghostbusters is starting to come back.
Everything's cool again.
Everything's cool again. I'm pretty much covered everything I had. So thank you for joining Jarrod and myself for this episode of G.I. Joe Outpost. Jarrod, thank you for spending time discussing these characters from 1984. And if our listeners wanted to contact you, where can they find you?
I am at Yard Sale Artist on X, Facebook, and Instagram. It's all Yard Sale Artist. You can check out my artwares, which does include a lot of G.I. Joe book page sketches. www.theyardsaleartist.com. What about you, Jim?
And you can find me on Facebook as Jim Meal, G-I-M-M-I-E-L. And I realized, my wife pointed this out to me, that there are 2 Jim Meal profiles. One that I had back about 5 years ago, and then the current one I'm using. When you look me up, do not use the one that has snake eyes holding an American flag. That is not me. I got hacked. So it's the one that is looks like me with a baseball hat.
Saboteur.
Yep. And also on Facebook, Timbers, Toys, and Customs, where I share some of the bigger Joe news. I don't do spur of the moment things, but some of the things I'm backing, shows I'm going to be at, and some of my customs that I do. Also on X as Jim the Joe Junkie. So I want to thank everyone at the Longbox Crusade Network for adding G.I.Joe Outpost to their extensive line of shows. Take a listen to all of the other shows that are on the Longbox Crusade on any podcatcher or on YouTube. And if you like what you hear, go to Patreon, become a Crusader Club member, where you get all the access.
All the access.
Join us next time, where we will be discussing issues of the G.I. Joe Marvel comics. These issues have a filler issue, one of the most popular and, dare I say, the most influential Joe comic ever printed. Cobra Commander gets captured. Until next time, Yo Joe.
Yo Joe.
The music themes for this show are done by musical genius Joe November. Please check out his SoundCloud at Josephline99. That's Josephline99. You will not regret it.